welcome to another edition of Melanated News You Can Use. I'm your host, Lady Lila Brown, and I have so many stories. So yeah, we started out, we're so happy. We're in a new broadcast with lots of news to share, a lot of updates, but some devastating things are happening. So I'm going to transition into some stateside news later, but I'm going to start with the international news story. Something's coming out of Sudan right now. So, as you know, this is a one-woman show, and I took my one-woman show to Sudan, Khartoum, and Merowe. So, my thoughts are truly with my people there. I'm going to keep the news flowing as it comes in. So if we're a little late or behind on some of the accounts, it is what it is. So we're going to listen to various sources from all over the world. And I'm just going to start with, for those that are new, I'm going to just go ahead and get right into it. If this information is new to you, welcome. This is the news. It's okay. And I'm going to just discuss a little bit more about what's happening in Sudan, but there are some people who do this so beautifully well, and I love to share their reports and broadcasts as well. So we're all in this together, and we're going to get it going. Thank you so much for tuning in, and maybe this can clarify some things for you all. Thank you.
Sudan.
Rival forces remain locked in a power struggle despite international calls for a ceasefire.
It's an all-out battle for control of the country between Sudan's army and a paramilitary unit known as the Rapid Support Forces,
the
RSF, led by men who used to be allies. Hundreds of people have been killed, and hundreds have been injured. There's fighting in different parts of Sudan, but it's heaviest in the capital, Khartoum. There have been attempts at a ceasefire, but they haven't lasted. There have been air attacks and shelling. The airport has been severely damaged. There's no running water or electricity. Supplies of food are running low.
This ridiculous battle that has civilians caught in the middle. We have nothing to do with this.
So what's behind the fighting? Well, people in Sudan have been struggling to set up a democracy after decades under one-man rule. Omar al-Bashir came to power in a military coup in the late 1980s, became president, and stayed for 30 years, until people rose up and demanded that he step down. Then the army took over, and people didn't want them in charge either. So after pressure from protesters, the army agreed to share power with different political groups in a transitional government. The idea was that it would oversee a transition to a democratic system. But 2 years later, the army kicked out the prime minister and seized power again.
The people in Sudan seem to be trapped in this limbo, and they're going round and round in a circle that involves the same people, with no clear path or trajectory on how they can actually start to plan for a transition.
There have been ongoing talks to make that transition happen between the military and political groups representing that pro-democracy movement. But a major reason the process is being held up is because of an underlying rivalry between the army and the Rapid Support Forces that have become like a second army. And many people see this as a personal rivalry between the army's leader, General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, who's effectively the leader of the country, and the leader of the RSF, General Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo, widely known as Hemeti. The thing is, for years, both men were on the same side and had been since the war in Darfur. Hemeti led a militia at the time widely known as the Janjaweed. They were used by al-Bashir's army to fight rebels in the region of Darfur.
They were created to protect the upper echelon of the military and the senior commanders.
They're accused of carrying out war crimes there, and al-Bashir actually got charged with committing genocide. In 2013, the militia were rebranded as the Rapid Support Forces and worked with the army on different missions. Then, in 2019, Hemeti and General al-Burhan joined up to get rid of al-Bashir. And during the big pro-democracy protests, the RSF and the army were accused of killing more than 100 people. But since then, the RSF has been acting a lot more independently, and they've grown more powerful.
They were able to establish vast investments around the country and outside the country, especially in the gold trade.
These two main actors, the Army and the Rapid Support Forces, were able to collude, now successfully for about 4 years to stay in power themselves, but there was always that core tension about who was the top dog between them.
So that brings us to the fighting right now. As part of Sudan's transition to democracy, there have been talks about integrating the RSF into the army, but they can't agree over the timeline. The army proposed 2 years, while the RSF wanted it to be 10.
The Army, had been making a stand. They realized that the Rapid Support Forces have been growing. The head, General Hemedti, has political ambitions himself, and I think there was a sense that if they did not somehow force the Rapid Support Forces to agree to integrate and to go under them, that this force would keep growing and grow out of the control of the formal military.
It's unclear who started the fighting, but on April 15th, both sides started trading accusations that they had attacked each other's bases in Khartoum. Then they fought to take control of the presidential palace, the airport, and the state TV channel. The army has air power, and they've been hitting RSF bases in the capital, many of them in residential areas. The RSF don't have planes, but they do have anti-aircraft weapons, and they have about 100,000 men. There have been plenty of calls for the fighting to stop, from Sudan's neighbors, the African Union, the UN, the EU, the US, and the UK. And there could be some leverage from countries like Egypt, which has been a close ally to the Sudanese army, and on the other side, the UAE, which has ties to the RSF. But there's no sign that either side wants to back down.
Right now, for a lot of people, it's a period of confusion. It's a period of uncertainty about what's going to happen in the next few minutes, the next few hours, the next few days. And it's a period of war, and they have nowhere to turn to.
A lot of people in Sudan are scared, heartbroken, and frustrated. Their country keeps getting derailed off that path towards democracy. It's a hope that seems even more distant now.
So the people that do the really good reporting, I appreciate them. I'm going to ride with, BBC kind of surprised me there the other night if you tuned into my broadcast. Let me know if you're here. Thank you so much. Thanks for tuning in. And I'm getting my friends in, and I'm inviting a few people in now. So thank you. So the latest with Sudan, I'm keeping up, and I just wanted to share that coming out of last night's clip as well. So there's so many updates, and it's happening really quickly. So great. All right, Al Jazeera giving us some. Now we're talking about the outside players. I think that might be too deep for us right now in this broadcast. I would love to talk to you about what I think. We know it's UAE, United Arab Emirates, and we know also the United States is somewhere up in there. And this is happening simultaneously with, of course, we got to go geopolitics with Ukraine and Russia and Ukraine. So other things are happening, and so I'm going to continue sharing information as it's coming in, and this is very important, very, 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 very important. Es muy importante. Videos. The videos in the clips that we're sharing, I have some clips from that region, and I want to go back through them. So I have some videos on my YouTube. So like I said, if you're listening live on my Facebook, thank you so much for tuning in. I appreciate you. And if you're listening later, most likely on my YouTube as well, thank you for just checking us out and seeing what I'm all about. And hopefully you find this information valuable. All right. So notice these things happen around Muslim holidays. Does anybody notice a trend here? Is anybody noticing a trend yet? Is anyone else noticing that this is always around Ramadan or these high holy seasons. When the Sudanese revolution took off, that was December. Anybody else noticing? So great. So a high and holy day is coming to an end. So we shall see. I thought it was supposed to be a time of peace. So it's just really confusing when you're trying to figure this all out. And we have our own issues here in the United States of America. And we still take time to tune in to our brothers and sisters across the diaspora. That's how we hold it down between the two lands. And I, at some point, do want to show the Cleopatra trailer. Since we're talking about this region. Great.
The Muslim holiday of Eid, marked by soldiers on the streets of Khartoum, cheered on by their supporters. The UN has called for an immediate ceasefire between the Sudanese army and the paramilitary group, the Rapid Support Forces. But there's been no confirmation from the army.
Our beloved citizens, this year we receive Eid while our country is bleeding. Because of this bleeding, we have dead people, injuries, separated families, and destroyed houses and institutions. This destruction and sound of gunfire did not leave room for happiness that our beloved people deserve.
The RSF says it's ready to observe a 72-hour truce and blames the army for the continuing violence. It's tweeted, "At this moment, when citizens are preparing to receive the first day of Eid al-Fitr, the neighborhoods of Khartoum are waking up to the bombings of aircrafts and heavy artillery in a sweeping attack that is directly targeting residential neighborhoods." 330 kilometers north of the capital in Merowe, people are hoping to celebrate the end of the fasting month of Ramadan as they usually would, with large family gatherings. They too have been caught up in the violence, but the army says it's now in control of the airport and the military base attached to it.
Thank God the country is safe, the situation is stable, and the shops have reopened. We were able to bring the children to the market for Eid clothes, and hopefully we were able to make them happy.
Days of fighting have left many Sudanese desperate and afraid. Tens of thousands of people have left the capital. Many have already arrived in neighboring Chad.
The vast majority of these people are women and children with huge humanitarian needs. They've fled seemingly, overnight with nothing. And we know that the urgent, immediate needs are what you would need if you had to flee your house.
Allahu Akbar. Allah.
Across Sudan, there's a sense of unease and fear, but also of resilience and little certainty about how things are going to move forward. Victoria Gatenby, Al Jazeera.
Oh, great. Al Jazeera is doing such a good report. I have to give them the credit, man. This is fucking fine journalism here. Giving you the information, checking in. I think, the fact that there's 16,000 Americans over there right now, very, very interesting. One American has been fatally taken out. No other way to say it. Sudan is in turmoil. And I got to get the latest. So thank you for watching with me. I'm getting a lot of this information as well. And thank you. Make sure you chime in. Whether you listen live or later, I appreciate that. And this area, there's a ceasefire and then there's not a ceasefire. So I'm sharing information as it's coming in. They're not listening to the UN. The envoys. Okay, here we go. I have to get this report. Thank you so much. Gonna keep the news rolling here. We're just as fast as we can get. Then we'll get over to our Black American mayors. And I think I just totally am just so happy for the city of New York. You got a fine leader there. All right. And I like to check in with some of my favorite reporters.
Is now too close to home.
Great. So, And we're going to keep the news going. Back to Sudan. 1,000 people trying to leave. Get out.
The threat of violence is now too close to home. Days of fighting have left many Sudanese desperate and afraid. Thousands of people are leaving Khartoum.
We were told to get out, anyone who is able to leave, but we can't just sit around. We need to make a living.
The army and paramilitary rapid support forces blame one another for breaking several ceasefires in recent days. The streets of the capital are seeing effects of conflict.
A lot of reports and pictures from people. Also, there's a lot of dead bodies in the street. Some of them are military and some of them are civilian. Some of them got recognized by the people they were from the neighborhood, but some of them were not.
During the lull in gunfire, some people venture out to stock up on food and water, but supplies are limited. And the United Nations warns a humanitarian catastrophe is looming. Many of the country's best hospitals are in Khartoum, where the most intense battles are taking place.
There are a few hospitals treating the injured and the number of doctors is limited. There's a lot of overcrowding. That's even though a lot of wounded can't make it to the hospitals because of the fighting.
For some, leaving isn't an option, at least not yet.
It's all surreal. You see children watching cartoons at home against a backdrop of airstrikes. I was walking outside with a friend who's hosting me, and we heard the sound of an attack. I asked her if indeed it was an airstrike, and she said calmly, yes. It feels strange that people are growing used to this type of situation.
After years of political instability, coups, and fighting, Sudan was on the verge of transitioning to a civilian-led government. Those plans are now on hold again. Despite going through several civil wars since its independence, the capital had remained stable and far from the scenes of fighting and its residents forced to flee. But it's now where sounds of heavy artillery fire and explosions can be heard throughout the day, and where it's becoming harder for people to get water and other basic necessities. And as thousands of people leave their homes in search of safety, there are fears that the violence could spread beyond Sudan's borders. Hiba Morgan, Al Jazeera, Khartoum.
Good to see Hiba Morgan. I know exactly where she is. She is one of my favorite correspondents and reporters. So I know where she is, and I know she's safe when I see her in that scenario. And let's make sure we keep it that way. My gosh. What in the holy entire high hell fuck? Damn. I'm glad we got that one. Jeez. My goodness. Notice this is international news, so you gonna get this either way. You think you can keep ignoring what's happening in Sudan? It's about to consume every news story in the world. Yeah, this one's hitting home. So I'm so happy to get that update that they're getting out. Some people said they were able to go shopping. Oh my goodness. Oh my gosh. All right, I'm gonna head over. That's a good update. We're gonna leave it right there because we're gonna get over to Sudan. We're gonna go back to Sudan because this is a longer report about their outside players. I definitely need to see that. But we are going to make our way over. We're gonna mosey over to the Big Four, as we are so affectionately calling them, and we're just gonna. This is great. Hey, what's up? What's up? What's up? Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for commenting. Thanks for being here. All right, we're going to keep it going. And so make sure whether you listen live or later, you're listening now, great. Hi, welcome. Let me know what city you're tuning in from. That will help. But guess what? The 4 largest cities in these United States of America are led by... I guess back to the way things were. Our top 4. Our top 4. Our Big 4. And they are all convening. Did you know we had over 500 black mayors, black American mayors leading these United States? And the top 4 our brothers and sisters in arms, locking arms. Okay, we're gonna get into it. I wanted y'all to tune in. We'll stop along the way. We'll chime in. It's pretty lengthy, but I'm just sitting here and we're gonna get started. Yay! Look at this. Oh, look at that. Great. We're gonna what top 4 cities? All right, Chicago. Yeah, great. Sylvester Turner of Houston. And the number 1 is Mayor Eric Adams, New York. And you know I'm rocking with my Karen Bass. So that's what we're doing here today. Gonna get right into it. And it was a really good conversation. So we're gonna get a little welcoming here just to set the tone. We're gonna tune in and out, and then we're gonna wrap up with Sudan. So great. We're gonna get it going here. You are amazing. I appreciate you all. Great.
Vice President, Federal Government Relations at the American Beverage Association.
So low.
First, I'd like to thank the African American mayors for hosting such a successful conference this week.
So we're gonna get right into the mayors here. It's the audio could be better, but you know, I'm so excited about Mayor Bass. That's mine.
The most significant child welfare policy.
So we're gonna listen in here. We're gonna talk. Gonna play some clips. But yes. All right. Here we go.
That, please welcome New York City's mayor.
So we're gonna start with New York City mayor. Great. New York has a black mayor.
Also joining us today is Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass. She is the 43rd mayor of Los Angeles and the first woman and second African American to be elected as the city's chief executive. With an agenda focused on accountability and setting a new direction for Los Angeles, her priorities are housing people immediately and increasing public safety and opportunity in every part of the City of Angels. While representing LA and Culver City in Congress, Mayor Bass helped protect small businesses during the pandemic and led the passage of what the LA Times called, quote, the most significant child welfare policy reforms in decades. Please join me in welcoming Mayor Karen Bass of Los Angeles. I am now thrilled to welcome Mayor Lightfoot. As a 56th mayor of Chicago, Mayor
Lightfoot. All right, Lightfoot, but that spot will still be
across Chicago's neighborhoods and communities. Her accomplishments include landmark ethics and good government.
The great thing about Chicago is that even though Mayor Lightfoot, Lori Lightfoot, is on her way out, she was not voted back in. At least that seat is still going to a black person, if my memory serves me correctly, Chicago. So I don't think there's been an inauguration yet. So clearly, as her tenure is winding down, her time has come to an end for Chicago. I like Lightfoot. I like me some Lightfoot. And Chicago was tripping on that one. Y'all was tripping on that one.
Last, but certainly not least, joining us is Houston Mayor Sylvester Turner.
Now, Sylvester Turner, he comes to mind. His leadership to me was superb during the that whole concert situation with the Travis Scott. That thing was that was pretty bad. So, the top 4 largest U.S. cities have black Americans at the helm. So they sat for a fireside chat, and they were interviewed by 2 young brothers. One is named Jaylen. He's like, you may remember him. He was the young brother, the youngest ever mayor for a U.S. city. I think like at 19 or 21, something like that, but probably like 19. He's probably like older than that now, 21 or 23 now, something like that. So, but Yeah, that's cute. So happy for them. And that gives me hope that at least the next generation is trying. So I'm gonna like mosey over there and see what they got going on eventually. But I'm focusing on the big dogs right now. So here they are, the young baby boys. We'll be interviewing them for a fireside chat. And we want our children to do well. Our children are the future. So great. We're gonna get into that. Thank you. This is a really good panel. I love Eric Adams now. Like he's so fun. I love him. Great.
We should first acknowledge the fact that for the first time in American history, the nation's 4 largest cities are led by black leaders.
Let's say that again. Let's run that again. Let's run that again.
The fact that for the first time in American history, the nation's 4 largest cities are led by black leaders. That's a big deal. Big deal. And so we really wanted to kick off this conversation, and my fellow young mayor, Jaylen Smith, will start us off. Jaylen?
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you, Mayor Bibb. I'm looking forward to today's discussion and learning more about what goes on in these big cities. And I'm just honored to be in the presence of you all. So Mayor Adams, the first question goes to you. I'd like to start with you. New York is the largest city in the nation with more than 8 million residents. Of the many issues that cross your desk every day, there must be one thing that cross your mind. And so, I want to know, what keeps you up at night, Mayor?
No, I think that all of my colleagues would agree the awesome responsibility of being a mayor. I heard someone state that you have 3 parties in the country, the Democrat, the Republican, and the mayors. And the job is volume. From borough president as the county executive of Brooklyn, I was drinking out of a garden hose. As the mayor, you're drinking out of 4 fire hoses. And it comes all day, all night, all the time. And it's how do you sectionalize that to make sure you can manage it in a real way. And then you have to hire the right team to make it happen. And what's very fascinating, I'm sure you can agree, that the people who did not want you to get elected, they want to tell you who you need to hire. And so when I came into office and I decided that I was going to hire the first African American woman to be the first deputy mayor, the first African American woman to be my chief advisor, the second African American woman to be my chief of staff, the first African American woman to be the police commissioner. When you start to look at my team, it's reflected in the city. So the reason I can actually sleep at night is because I brought the right people on board that's going to watch my back.
Yes, sir. So, Mayor, I have one more question. Define the swag and how it influenced your work as mayor. And I think I know when I see it. But can you please help me define it?
And that's so important because I'm the mayor of the city of New York. I was in Qatar the other day, and he said, and the mayor stated that there's America and then New York City. And what people expected, they expected me to fit in. Like being the mayor, being the borough president, being a state senator, being a captain of the police department. That's my glory. That's not my story. My story My story is being dyslexic and bullied as a child. My story is being arrested and beat by police officers. My story is being rejected. And so when I came here and became the mayor, it's not because I came from a family of prestigious people. I came from a mom that cleaned houses. And so when you could have someone that's arrested, rejected, dyslexic, and now I'm elected to be the mayor of the most powerful city in the country, you walk differently. Yeah. You know, you walk, you know, you got this.
Come on, Mayor. Come on, New York.
That's good, man. That's good.
How could you not have a level of you sit in front of all of these people who wake up every day praying and hoping that I can fail. They watch me navigate the COVID crisis. They watch me navigate 52,000 people coming into our city without one penny from the federal government. They watch me decrease crime in my city, deal with homelessness in my city. The bond ratings, Fitch, raised our bond to a AA. I'm the CEO of the largest corporation in America, and my bald head, earring wearing swagger is running this city. My way.
Yeah.
That's swag.
Way. Well, as my pastor would say, won't he do it? Yeah. That's right. Now, I want to go to Mayor Bass for a second, because I feel like we're in church today right now. Yeah. We in church. Mayor Bass, you took the helm of leading Los Angeles at a time where homelessness is at the forefront of our country. Can you tell us how you're tackling this problem and how you've done such a great job doing it in your first 100 days?
Yes, well, first of all, it is wonderful being here as a new mayor. I think I'm in day 135. And seeing all of you and being able to meet you over the last few days has been wonderful. And I have just enjoyed so much watching you, Mayor Adams. But the solidarity that we have felt, I remember right after my election was called, Mayor Benjamin called me up and invited me on a Zoom call with these three individuals. And just the way they have been so supportive has been amazing. So please give them a round of applause. I left Congress. A lot of people thought that was a little crazy to leave Congress. And I wasn't tired of Congress or anything, but what made me leave is the fact that LA is about 3.8 million folks, black folk, 8% of the city, 34% of the people living in tents, 47,000 people in Los Angeles in tents. And my concern was that we were getting ready to repeat the 90s. In the 90s, it was crack. In LA, it was the Crips, the Bloods, 1,000 homicides. And the only response that society had for us was to begin what we would later call mass incarceration. And so now I was worried that poverty, deep poverty, was going to be criminalized. And I did not want to see that created. We've seen this movie before. We know where it's going, which is why on day one, I didn't go to City Hall. I went straight to our Emergency Operations Center, declared a state of emergency, put the city in state of emergency, because it's an emergency to have 47,000 people sleeping on the street, 4 or 5 of them dying every single day. And for us to be only 8% of the population and 34% of the tents, 74% of the people in the streets are black or brown. And so what we've been able to do in the first 100 days is dispel an extremely important myth. And that is that people are on the streets because they want to be on the streets because they're all strung out on drugs. We have thousands of children who are in those tents. We have foster youth in those tents. We have veterans. We have women who are fleeing domestic violence. We do have people coming out of prison because of mass incarceration and punishing people after they get out. They didn't have any place to go, so they get out of prison and then go to a tent. And of course, we have people suffering from substance abuse and mental illness. So that's why I gambled to run. And, you and I ran against somebody who put $110 million into the race, the most money. He even beat Bloomberg. Bloomberg York spent 100 million. But again, it just shows that when you can do the grassroots work, you can even overcome that. So that's why I did it, and we've been able to get 1,200 folks out of those tents in the first 100 days. We got them into motels. We got another 3,000 off the street into housing that had already been planned. So it's very clear to me there is a pathway out of this. But I just want to conclude by saying this is a problem, as I've learned in talking to many of you. This is a problem that we're experiencing across the country. And this part of it reminds me of the 90s too, because when crack hit, there was a time period when we really didn't want to admit that we all knew somebody. We all had somebody. When mass incarceration started, we didn't always want to say, well, I have Pookie in my family and he's in prison. And I think it's the same way with homelessness. This is a problem across the country. And you know how you can go to a city that has 2% black folk, but 40% of the people in jail are black? Well, homelessness is disproportionately black all around the country. And I think we need to raise this as a national issue. It's not just housing. Housing, of course, but people are sleeping on our streets everywhere. And I think that is an emergency for black people across the country.
I want to move down to Mayor Turner. Mayor Turner, you lead the country's most diverse city. How has your background of growing up in Houston's projects changed your perspective as mayor?
I don't know if it's changed my perspective. I grew up.
Okay, great. I love Mayor Turner as well, but I just wanted to come back. Thank you all for watching, bringing this to your attention. We are checking in with the Big Four, is what they're calling them. And so, great. So I'm going to cut over to Lightfoot because I very much enjoy listening there as well. And I'm just sharing this information. Wow, more than 80 black mayors convening on Washington, D.C. Madam Mayor Karen Bass is no stranger to Washington and politics there. So glad to see her back. Hope she feels comfortable. It's a lot of going back and forth because she's doing the work. They doing the work. All these mayors are doing the work. And so we're going to check in with Lightfoot because I want to just a really good response. I listened to this in the playback and really good response. I must say.
Key priority. Can you talk about the work you've been doing to lead on pay equity in Chicago?
First of all, it's great to be here with all of you, and it's really great to be here with my fellow Big Four mayors. We do love and respect and support each other, lean into each other in times of triumph, but also in times of tragedy or other challenges that we all face every single day. And while we represent the biggest four cities in the country, everything that we are doing is happening in every city across the country. It's just different scale. So I want to make sure I say that. And look, you know, I'm going to flip the script a little bit. Yes, we have, I think, done great work on pay equity. But for me, really, what our work has to be about is about building wealth in places that have been denied for far too long. You know, I walked in the door talking about equity and inclusion, and I got some quaint smiles from some of the downtown business folks in Chicago, and these folks all know what I'm talking about. And now, 4 years later, they're all singing that mantra. We are not finished. There's more work to do. But if we are not intentionally focused on righting historic wrongs, particularly around economic development, about putting money in people's pockets, as a daughter of a woman who was a care worker, if we're not thinking about how those women that are out there working 2-3 jobs, trying to keep it together for their families, if we're not focused on those things, we're missing incredible opportunities. So yes, pay equity is part of it, but for me, the answer to a lot of the challenges that we face in our cities, all roads lead to poverty, the lack of investment, and making sure that our kids see people who go to work every day, people who have good jobs, that they can take care of their families. And just as Mayor Turner was talking about being present in his neighborhood, we need to be present at tables of power and stop being satisfied with taking crumbs from somebody's table. And you mentioned, all the statements by companies after the murder of George Floyd, which I frankly call the "I love black people" statements. Well, really, how many of those companies that have made those statements, made those pledges, have actually followed through? And if we don't, as mayors, hold those folks accountable, shame on us for our communities. But as a mayor, I believe that we have to lead by example. I can't wag my finger at corporate America and push them to do more if I'm not taking care of business on my end. So we have put out a transparent equity study to show what's happening in city government and making sure that women are not being paid less than men. We have put out transparency around who we are hiring to make sure that we are living our values of diversity and not just hiring the same old from a political organization and not really opening up opportunities for them. We've done the same thing with our buying power around procurement, right? In the city of Chicago, we procure right around $4 billion every year in goods and services. Surely some of those contracts can go to black and brown and women and veterans-owned businesses. So it's different tools and levers that we can pull, but it's all centered around equity and righting historic wrongs to build wealth in people who deserve to see a return on their investment in our city, living in our city, paying taxes in our city. They should get the same kind of resources as wealthy neighborhoods do. But that hasn't been the story of Chicago, and I've done everything I can to flip that script for our residents.
Thank you so much, Mayor Lightfoot.
That's, I think what Mayor Lightfoot stated is just so powerful when you think about it. Coming out of George Floyd, coming out of Rodney King, coming out of Clifford Glover, coming out of, I could just go down the line. Where we are right now is that there's a real disconnect of the Army. And we had a good conversation with Brother Smith back in this whole room. We must operate from a blueprint. We can't do this scatter and pray stuff. This is not how you run corporations. This is not, these cities are corporations. Our budgets, managing, I have 302,000 employees. And right now, we need to sit down. I'm getting ready to meet with Reverend Sharpton, my mayors, and my business leaders. Right now, we are running the major cities. Mayors of colors are running major cities. We are heading major corporations, United Airlines and others. We are top athletes making hundreds of millions of dollars. When we were with my brother, the producer of the movie producer, the other day thank you. But we need to get together and create a blueprint, and everyone is operating off the blueprint. Don't tell me after George Floyd you're going to buy a journal in my dinner dance page. Man, I don't need that. I don't need no journal. So if my healthcare professionals that have been talking about maternity issues, maternal morbidity, they need to draft that aspect of the blueprint. My business leaders, my finance leaders, they need to draft that aspect of the blueprint. My educators that's talking about, in New York City, 65% of black and brown children never reach proficiencies, yet we're spending over $30 billion. People eat off of the dysfunctionalities of our communities. And so, when we all have a blueprint, that blueprint is on the desk of the mayors, it's on the desk of my corporate brothers and sisters. It's on the desk of my healthcare. We're all operating off a blueprint. Right now, we don't have a blueprint. We sit down. How many of us know who's the CEO of United Airlines, who's a brother? All of these major corporations, we all need to know each other and sit down together and say, this is what we're doing. If not, Archbishop Desmond Tutu has a quote: "We spend a lifetime pulling people out of the river instead of going upstream and preventing them and falling in the first place." We're pulling black and brown people out of the river and then doing analysis of who's eating off of pulling us out of the river don't look like us. People have profitized our dysfunctionality, and we need to stop it, and a blueprint will allow us to do it.
Mayor Adams, you are spot on with this notion of how do we, as America's mayors, work better with the private sector and have a grassroots and grass top strategy for our community. Because we are the architects of our own destiny. No one's going to save us but ourselves. And so I want to continue to build on this conversation and start with Mayor Bass. Mayor Bass, from your vantage point, how do we do a better job of making this connection and start to change the national narrative of how to leverage black political power in a more powerful way, leading with America's black mayors in our cities?
Well, I would just say, first of all, it's black political power, it's also black economic power. And I think that that is what is often dismissed, which is why people take ads out in a journal, but do not invest to the scale in which we need to have investments made, within our city. I think it's very important that we begin to change the conversation, because we might be mayors of very large cities, but none of our cities are all black. And what we don't get the credit for, it's just like with the Congressional Black Caucus, when the chairman, Stephen Horsford, talked yesterday and said that the CBC now represents 80 million people, 18 million of which are African American. And I think the coalition building that we need to do, one across race, but also each of us have congressional delegations, state legislative delegations, and I think oftentimes we don't maximize the power of all of that we have, bringing elected officials together. And then, I look at the things that, you have done in New York and you have done in Chicago, and we can all build on, and many of you have done around your cities, we can all build on that. And I do think it's the agenda that you talk about. We have to have an agenda, but we have to hold people accountable and stop resting on, yes, we got a little bit. No, we need to be at the table. And I say what you say just slightly differently. What I say is that in our country, we have monetized poverty. And that's one of the reasons why it's so difficult, because people profit off of our poverty. What we had in LA, because LA is a very liberal city, right? Very liberal city. Everybody had their Black Lives Matter flags out, okay?
Come on.
Then crime ticked up, and there was smash and grab, and all of a sudden, it was Black Lives Matter last year, but this year you're scaring me. So I don't think I really want to go there anymore. But we all know this. So we knew when George Floyd happened and when the corporation stepped up, we knew that was going to be temporary, because we've seen this before. We have to learn and remember our history. These moments are fleeting, but when they are fleeting, we need to capture them as well and say, don't just make a contribution. I want to be at the table. We're going to define what the community needs and talk about the investment that needs to be made, a substantive investment, not a tokenistic investment. Don't tell us that this is the new diversity person you've hired and now that box is checked. And so that means there's equity because we have somebody whose title says equity. That's not what equity is.
Mayor Lightfoot.
So just to build on the point I think that Mayor Bass made, what I will say is, from my perspective, is as black folks, we need to be united. Because if we are not united, they're going to divide us, and we will constantly be conquered. Right? So I've been mayor for the last 4 years. My time is winding down. But what I saw and what I see is the people in my neighborhoods who have been starved for resources. There are areas of my city that look like the fires of '68 just got put out. Black folks have represented those areas forever. Why is it that we have taken so long for ourselves to wake up? If we are content with crumbs, our people will never, ever prosper. So yeah, absolutely, we need to hold them accountable, but we need to hold ourselves accountable as well. And if we are not united, and we don't have the blueprint that Mayor Adams is 100% right about, and we don't execute on that fidelity and stop the nonsense, stop the crabs in the barrel, but come together as a people and demand more, we're never going to get over the hill, ever.
Great. And look at, and brother, just look at New York. Just to bounce on what you said, look at New York City, right? The largest city in America. We have a black mayor. We have a mayor of color. We have a public advocate of color. We have 3 of our DAs are of color. We have the leader of the Assembly of color. The leader of the Senate of color. The Attorney General is of color. Over 40-something committee chairs are of color. When you look at Hakeem Jeffries, the minority leader in Congress of color, we have all of this chocolate. So when people are running around here telling me fight the fire or fight the power, Negro, you are the power. We are the power. We are the power.
Power to the people. More power to the people.
You can use that power. Yeah. Waking up every day, using that power of, let me see how I'm going to hate on Eric. Yeah. You know, Eric hit on my 3rd grade girlfriend when he was in 3rd grade, so now I hate him for life. Come on, stop. Yeah. You know, the city is being destroyed by the migrant crisis, and none of my folks came to Washington, D.C. to fight for the resources that's going to undermine every agency in our city. So what Mayor Lightfoot is saying, we didn't get here to look and hate on each other. We don't have to agree on everything. I don't agree with everything I do. How the hell am I agree with everything you do? But you can't tell me, when you look at the agenda of all of us, you're going to find 8 out of 10 things we agree on. So let's lean on what we agree on and not focus on the 2 things we don't agree on.
Love that. Love that. Phyllis, I think we got next year's theme for the conference. Mayor Turner, I want you to chime in on this point as well.
You know, it is about leadership. But one of the things that I've done in the city of Houston is convene all of our black elected officials at all levels. State representatives, congressional leaders, school board members, you name it, at all levels. And to say, this is where we are, and now this is where we need to go. And people are looking for that blueprint. And even at the city of Houston, when I came in, to all of my departments, I said, these are the priorities that we need to address. And these are the ones that we need to focus on. And so to all of my directors, whatever we're doing, they have to align with these priorities. Because this is where we have a limited period of time, and we need to get it done. And then I said to them, yes, I have a 4-year term, but the people have given ourselves a 1-year term. And so let's see how much we can accomplish in this 1 year. One thing that mayors know is that we have to produce. Congressional people and everybody else, and they can talk the policy, but for us, we have to produce. And we have to do it when facing things that we did not foresee and could not stop. And so in my case, for example, the city has faced 7 federally declared disasters. Okay, so we have to deal with those things that we could not stop, but at the same time, we have to move the city forward. And so when I came into office, one of the biggest financial crises was pension and unfunded pension liabilities. It had plagued the city for some 25 years. But when I came in as the African American mayor, what the people and the business community said to me, Mayor, you must fix it, and you must fix it now. They didn't say that to anybody else. But when I came in, my paper said, fix it now. The business leadership said, fix it now. And I will say, and brought in all of the union groups and said, we need to address it. These are the things that, these three things that I need. And now you tell me, how can you work with your memberships to get it there? The bottom line is, at the end of the day, we end up putting in a permanent fix that was approved by a Republican legislature, approved by our voters, and we got it fixed. And now under pension liability that was in way up in the billions, now is below 2.2 billion and going down every day. When I came into office, I faced a $160 million budgetary shortfall. But since then, we have turned that around, and now the city's financial position is stronger than ever before. We face homelessness. But in the last, since 2012, and even going to my administration, we have reduced homelessness by over 65%. There are less than 3,000 people who are homeless on the streets in the city of Houston, and we are still driving that down. The point that I want to make, and then with communities that have been underserved and under-resourced, one thing as black mayors that we know, even when we represent a very diverse community, people who have been ignored for a long time, or disenfranchised and been without, they don't give African-American mayors a long time to fix the problem. Even African-Americans will say to you, Mayor, you need to fix, where are you, and fix it right now. We don't have a long runway. They may give it to somebody else that doesn't look like us. But when we step in as mayor, people want the grocery stores yesterday. They want an elimination of energy deserts, food deserts yesterday. And so we have to, we have to let them know, yes, we've been plagued by these problems for decades. And yes, I see you, I'm going to respond to you, but I need you to work with me. And just like you're putting pressure on me, put pressure on the other folk at the same time. And so what I say to them, you coming to me in front of City Hall, but I need you to go to Austin, Texas. I need you to go to the Capitol and to other places. So the point is, but working together, and as mayor, what I can say to people who look like me, to business leaders and others, at least under this administration, we have provided more business opportunities for businesses of color in the entire history of the city of Houston. And so I can say to them, you didn't used to have what you got right now. But look at you right now. So we mayors have to produce. I don't care what anyone says. We are the ones that come in, and we are the ones that saying, looking at our agendas, and we have to check the box, because we don't have the luxury of not producing. If we don't produce, everybody, including black folk, hold us accountable and will say, thank you very much, next.
Right. Well, brother, well said. Someone came up to me one day and said, you know what, you have not fixed the potholes, crime is high, transit system is not operating. I said, I've been in office 3 days. You go look at my tabloids and see my 5th day in office. Or why is crime still going on? Why we didn't fix all the problems? And so there's 2 things that we must do as black mayors. One, we cannot fall into the stereotype. We cannot be embarrassed to say that we need to support public safety and have our police do their jobs effectively. It can't be, you can't ignore Bebe that's out there repeatedly creating dangerous crimes in our community. And we are ashamed to stand up and say, this person is creating a dangerous environment in my community. I'm gonna make sure my police do their job and do it effectively and not be abusive, but I'll be darned. There's no consolation to a mother who you go home and say, your son was not killed by someone in a blue uniform. They were killed by a gangster in a blue jean. She's not gonna feel better. We need to be honest and forthright about the small numerical number of people who are repeated offenders. We have about 2,000 people in our city that are extreme recidivists. They are arrested one day, back on the street the next day, carrying a gun, committed another crime. And I refuse to say, just because you are black, I'm going to ignore that fact that you are committing crimes in our community. Number two.
Amen, amen, amen.
Number two.
Lightfoot.
We have to stop being ashamed about corporate partners and partnership with other groups. I team up with my Korean, my Indian, my South Asian, my Central America, South America. All of my business entities, I sit down at the table with them. They've helped us with our summer youth employment, our internship, paid internship. They have invested in our public relation campaign that's selling the product of New York. They're part of our tourism. We get 56 million tourists. They have assisted us and sat down at the table with us and stated, how do we help your administration? Our corporate entities are part of the body that's needed to ensure that we can provide the goods and services in our city, particularly where you have those financial gaps. But we have, oftentimes, we want to ignore the corporate leaders because the numerical minority are yelling and want to call you a sellout because you're willing to sit inside a suite. You got to ignore the noise and allow your heart to move you in the right direction to deal with the complexities of running the cities. If you allow the noise, the loudest yellers that's on steps of City Hall to control you, you'll never get anything done. When they come and protest me, I go outside and do a selfie with them.
Wow. So, mayors, I want to move into talking about the young people. Because we know we've seen a lot of young people running for public office, such as me and Juan. But what are your top priorities in engaging the youth?
Well, you know, first of all, it is wonderful to see the young mayors. It is wonderful to see the next generation of leaders, isn't it? Give the Brown Brothers a round of applause. And I deeply believe that one of the most important things that I can do as a leader, period, not just as mayor, but is to pay attention to the next generation coming up. Because if we understand that our fight for justice is one that goes on forever, which means we have to be invested in who comes afterwards. And so that means that we have to be deliberate about opportunities. We have to be deliberate about the relationships that we have in the business community to make sure that there is representation there. And I know in my city, just like other cities, the biggest problem is income inequality. The biggest manifestation of that, or I should say the worst manifestation of that in Los Angeles, is homelessness. But it's profound income inequality. And in talking to many of you, in so many of our areas, people can't afford to live in our cities anymore, and because of the price of housing. But if you look at income inequality, you know, how do you address that? You address that with good jobs, with a strong education system. And then to me, there's only three types of jobs. You're either self-employed, the public sector, or the private sector. And so the relationship that we have with our private sectors in our communities is absolutely critical. But we have to make sure that we provide, again, a pathway and that those opportunities for young people. I'm a big believer in internships, and I don't care how old you are, because whatever age you are, there is a way that you can become involved. But I do think that we have to be deliberate about those opportunities. And I also appreciate what you're saying about public safety. We absolutely have to recognize that when crimes are committed, people have to be held accountable. But at the same time, I also believe that we have to address the underlying reasons. And one of the things that I did was I'm establishing an office of community safety, while I'm also calling for recruiting more officers, because we're down, our law enforcement is down just like it is around the country. But we have to be deliberate about that too. We can't just allow our law enforcement agencies to decrease, because we know what the consequences of that are going to be. But we have to do both at the same time. So my Office of Community Safety is going to focus on the unarmed responses, going to focus on preventing crimes. I think we've been involved in these areas for long enough. We know of evidence-based strategies to interrupt violence, to reduce crime, to prevent it from happening in the first place. So I'm going to call for more officers, but I'm also going to call for funding for those community-based strategies. Get the people who were formerly incarcerated back involved in the community in a positive way. They're looking for those opportunities, and we know how to do that. And so I think that We have to do both at the same time. Law enforcement isn't the only solution, and unarmed response and community-based efforts aren't the only solution as well. They both have to work together.
I would say to you that when I ran for office, my daughter told me, Dad, I'll work for you, but you will have to design the city for the future and not for the people your age and older. That's what my daughter said, and she said, I'll head your millennial team once you become mayor, and she did, and we do have that in place. We also have my youth council, the high school students. For every city council member, there's a youth representative, and I meet with them on a regular basis.
I love it. I love it. I love these mayors. Wow. And so I know it was a really good time out there. It's winding down today, and I'm just happy to be able to share a little bit more information. Hopefully, you're all paying attention to your local politics, and love listening to Lightfoot, because you always want to listen to the person that's on their way out, because they telling it like, hey, this is how T.I. is. I want to get back to Lightfoot. It's great.
City that are wreaking havoc every day and need to be off the street. That's reality. What do we say to not only the victims of crimes, but the people who are terrified about crimes in their neighborhoods, most of whom look like us? If we say, yeah, the police department is spending all this time and resources to arrest, put a case on, and then the judges and the prosecutors say, you know what, we're going to let you out on electronic monitoring to wreak havoc again. If somebody musters the courage to come forward and identify the person who had just shot up their neighborhood, and then sees Pookie walking bold as day back on the street 2 days later, what does that say to them? You're telling them that the criminal justice system doesn't care about victims and witnesses. And if we don't call that out every single day with these prosecutors and with these judges, many of whom don't live in our city and don't care about what's happening, then we are going to lose an opportunity to advocate for the victims and the witnesses and the residents who just want and deserve peace. We got to say it. We got to say it.
That's great.
Let me just address the issue regarding our young people. We have to have a multi-tiered strategy. All of us have designed intervention programs for that cohort of 16 to 24. We made sure that 50% of our jobs are going to those kids that are disconnected from school, because we know the data tells us they're more likely to be victims and perpetrators of crime. But I'm going to urge you as mayors, don't forget the critical time period of 0 to 5. Because if those kids don't come to kindergarten ready and able to learn, you're going to be spending more money on the back end of their life trying to help them. Spend the money on the front end, no matter the circumstances that they're born into. We instituted a program through our Department of Public Health called Family Connected. And what we do is after 2 weeks, 2 weeks after a live birth goes home, we send an RN into those homes to do a check well-being on babies and moms, and frankly to see what's going on in the household and if they need to be connected up to services. We have more money to do good in the city of Chicago right now than probably since the Great Depression. But if people don't get access to those resources, it's all for naught. So we've got to look at every possibility that we can to help support those babies and young children, no matter what the circumstances that they're born into, so they don't become a statistic on the back end where we've got to say, well, how do we intervene? How do we get them connected up?
Well, that's upstream. That's upstream. And when you look at some of the work that Mayor Lightfoot has done in Chicago, what Mayor Turner has done in Houston, and we're comfortable in talking about our intervention work. My dyslexia screening, 40% of my inmates in jail are dyslexic. So now we are screening all of our children for dyslexia. I'm dyslexic.
Whoa, Lightfoot boy. Yeah, that reminds me that Jay-Z was very instrumental in that area. about letting those people out on bond for some violent stuff, man. Chicago better get it together and keep it together. So so thankful for the mayors. That's pretty much it that we got for them. They were amazing. It was great to see. So I just wanted to keep y'all posted. That's a great realization that the top 4 largest cities in these United States are all helmed by Black American mayors. These are 2 of them. Wow, even they, and look, I love that they have the young people hosting.
Let's give our panelists another round of applause for their great leadership.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
I wanted to hear what he was saying. Hold on, he was saying something to them.
Stokes. I don't think Carl would have ever imagined.
Oh yeah, that was a really good outro. Wow, he's remarkable. This man, who is he?
The first Black mayor of a major American city, Carl B. Stokes. I don't think Carl would have ever imagined that we would have 4 Black leaders leading our nation's 4 largest cities. And this is a testament that the promise of this country can be realized. So let's keep pushing. Let's keep fighting. Let's give our panelists another round of applause for their great leadership. Thank you so much.
They are amazing. All these, I'm just so impressed. This is kind of stuff I like. Oh my God, this is the kind of stuff I enjoy. Oh yes, like I said, Our Lady made the mayor. Karen Bass alongside Lori Lightfoot, Eric Adams, and Sylvester Turner, all as mayors, the honorable positions, the noble titles that they hold. I cheer them on. I'm so happy. This is great. So I'm going to finish off back with Sudan here. And happy to see that. I think it might be a little bit more going on, so I'll check it out and I'll share it. I wanted to, let's see, did we do that? I think we're good on Sudan for right now. I think we're good. Oh, we'll finish off here. I got to. Oh, so much information, so much data and news, but great. So we'll keep it going. Thank you. Thank y'all for tuning in. I appreciate you. We're going to keep it going. Great. And welcome back. We're going to finish off with Sudan. A longer report, you'll notice here. And it is what it is. We'll wrap it up here. Thank you.
Rival sides bring enough pressure to stop the fighting, or is their involvement only complicating peace? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Fuli Batibo. Fighting in Sudan between forces loyal to 2 generals is threatening to turn into a prolonged conflict. Violence erupted in Khartoum a week ago. That followed weeks of power struggles between Army Chief Abdel Fattah al-Burhan and his deputy Mohamed Hamdan Dagalo, known as Hemeti, the commander of the Rapid Support Forces, or RSF. So far, hundreds of people have been killed and thousands injured. It's led to thousands more fleeing the capital, Khartoum, for neighboring Chad. Many of them fear this may be the beginning of a much wider conflict. Now, outside forces are complicating the situation, with both sides receiving support from regional and global powers. We'll get to our guests in a moment, but first, this report.
Ooh.
From chaos to calm, intense street battles have thrown Sudan's capital into turmoil in the past few days. Its streets are emptying as thousands of people flee Khartoum. The conflict is driven by a power struggle between Sudan's army, led by Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, and the Rapid Support Forces, a paramilitary group under Mohamed Hamdan Dagalo, also known as Hemedti. The two generals have been jostling for control of the country's economy and its military. That has torn up plans for a return to civilian rule.
This destruction and sound of gunfire did not leave room for happiness that our beloved people deserve. We are very sad for this pain, but there's still hope that together we'll pass this crisis and come out of it more united and strong. One army, one nation.
Sudan's strategic location on the Red Sea and its access to the Nile River and vast gold reserves have long been coveted by other powers, leading to both sides being backed by outside forces. Hemedti accuses Egypt of colluding with Burhan and sending fighter jets and soldiers to help the Sudanese military. Egypt has denied the allegations and said its forces were in Sudan for a joint military exercise. Hemedti has close ties with Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Libya.
That's what I thought.
And Libyan
That's what I
warlord
thought.
Khalifa Haftar has
Saudi
reportedly
Arabia.
sent military supplies to the Rapid Support Forces, which he denies. The Russian mercenary organization Wagner Group has also been accused of plundering Sudan's gold resources to bankroll its operations in Ukraine.
We don't have yet information that it has been actively engaged in conflict, but it is, of course, in no way it can be denied that it has been somehow behind the Hemedti's organization and trying to protect that RSF's domination in Sudan's politics.
Israel is involved too.
Told
Its
you.
Foreign Minister Eli Cohen has been engaging with Burhan on normalizing ties between the two countries in recent years. A prolonged conflict would also disrupt plans by UAE companies to build ports, as well as China's investments in Sudan.
That port of Sudan.
Any escalation would have regional implications, threatening nearby states like South Sudan that export oil through its northern neighbor. There would also be a risk of rising numbers of refugees fleeing across borders, causing more instability. And for Sudan itself, the longer the conflict goes on, the bigger the risk of it widening, and the greater the suffering of its people. Felix Nyawara for Inside Story.
Damn.
My name's Daniel.
I'm so happy we could talk about that. That clears up a lot. It's what I've already was thinking. I've already kind of projected that. That's exactly what I thought was the case. This Inside Story, just giving y'all a little bit more in depth. This great sister here is an amazing. I do kind of want to hear from some of these people on the ground. So we'll tune in.
Journalist and analyst covering the Middle East and North Africa region. In Khartoum, Sudan, Kholoud Khair, founding director at Confluence Advisory, a Sudan-based think tank. She's also host of Spotlight 249 on Capital FM Sudan. And in Montreal, Canada, is Khalid Medani, associate professor and chair of the African Studies program at McGill University. Khalid is also author of many political and economic publications on Sudan. A warm welcome to you all. Thank you for joining us. Kholoud, in Khartoum, let me start with you if I can. I understand that you've been coordinating safe passage for people to leave Khartoum. Can you tell us first about the current situation on the ground? Are people able to leave? And if they are, where are they heading to?
Well, it's quite a difficult, gut-wrenching decision to make whether to stay or to go. There are risks, considerable risks to both. Some people have made the calculation that it's better to stay and wait for a better sort of exit, a more secure exit, and others have decided that it's too dangerous for them to stay, and so many are heading southwards towards Jazeera State on Medani Street. But what we've just heard in the past few hours is that Medani Street has seen some clashes between the paramilitary RSF and the Sudan Armed Forces and has been taken over by the paramilitary forces, which makes it difficult for people to traverse, mostly because experiences of others of passing checkpoints by the paramilitary forces say that people have experienced looting and people have experienced, being shot at and being sent back. So that is no longer as much of a viable option.
Have people been able to leave the country and head to Chad or other neighboring countries?
Chad is closed.
Well, Khartoum is bang smack in the middle of Sudan, and so it's very difficult to get to any of Sudan's borders. Of course, Sudan borders many countries, and you said earlier that I was, helping people to find safe passage. Everyone is doing that. There are WhatsApp groups that have been set up, sort of Twitter sites, spaces that have been set up. People are calling each other using, most importantly, local resistance committees who know the streets really well. And it's just a case of, at this point, almost Russian roulette, whether you make it through or not.
Khulud, we are discussing today on Inside Story the foreign component to the confrontation. Are you aware on the ground in Sudan of any direct or indirect involvement by regional countries in the current fighting? We've heard reports of Libyan warlord Khalifa Haftar perhaps sending military support to the paramilitary RSF, reports of Egypt sending support to the army. What is the extent of outside involvement in the current fighting?
Well, those of us who have access to the internet, who still have access to the internet, have been keeping up with the reporting on what's going on in Sudan. And increasingly, people are, unsurprised by the fact that Sudan's neighbors would get involved for several reasons. One, there's a history of some of these actors, particularly Egypt, favoring SAF, the United Emirates, sort of having working relationships with both the armed forces and the paramilitary forces, but favoring the paramilitary forces. So, there is an awareness that this is happening. By now, one would have expected that supplies, particularly for the paramilitary force, would be dwindling, but that doesn't seem to be the case. So it does track with the reporting that there is external engagement.
All right, Matt Nashed in Cairo, let me come to you. Tell us more about the foreign component to the current fighting. Who supports whom and to what end? What are some of these regional powers wanting to get out of Sudan?
Yeah, I think, the lines right now look increasingly clear, right? And they're not so different, I think, than the fault lines that predated the fighting as well. As Khulud alluded to, SAF, Sudanese armed forces have always been favored and outright supported and then coordinated with by Egypt. And this dates back to a very, very long history. Dates back to the current leadership in Egypt right now. As a result of that, I think Egypt obviously has a number of strategic interests that they feel is quite existential for them, and that's on one side that they would like to secure that. I mean, most notably, we have the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, and obviously, Egypt and Sudanese armed forces have coordinated with a number of military drills in order to kind of flex their muscles to Ethiopia in the past. And I think there's also the economic side that Egypt has benefited from a number of kind of cheap produce and trade that with both armies controlling significant amounts of their domestic economies. That partnership has become a lifeline for Egypt as well, considering its very difficult economic situation right now. So that's on that side. Egypt also, of course, has more of an ideological, I would say less of an ideological sense, but maybe just through its long-standing partnership, it also just has this view of security in a conventional sense, actually, where it views that the guarantors of security have to come through military men and military institutions. On the other side, very quickly, obviously Hemeti is being supported. Predated had a long relationship. Predated this crisis had quite a long, extensive relationship with the Emirates as well. Not as deep and as long as Egypt, obviously, with the SAF's military, but still there was partners in providing gold mines there. There was obviously the mercenaries that was sent to Yemen accordingly. And so it's no surprise that obviously the Emirates are supporting Hemeti in this fight, I think both diplomatically and reportedly their hands seem to be in the background, militarily as well, right? So I think, but just to conclude very quickly, there's the ideological prism in the way that the Emirates view security, which I think is very different than how the Egyptians view security. Most people understand why the Egyptians are doing this, but for the Emirates, I think there's quite a very fundamental fear, I think, for them of, obviously, the remnants of Bashir's, Islamist loyalists particularly. I think they feel that Burhan is particularly under pressure for them. There was reports that Burhan, was under pressure from the Emirates to try to rein that constituency in, but it seems more and more reportedly that he is being pressured from within that. So, I mean, there's that element of it, but common to both of them, I'll stress, is that neither actor, regardless of how they view security interests for the Emirates, obviously doesn't want this ripple effect of political Islam in any way, but neither of them want a civilian democratic movement. And as a result of that, the two groups they backed have
We'll get to that. We'll get to that in a moment, Matt. I just want to bring Khalid into the conversation and ask you, Khalid.
I'm like, say what? I'm like, wait, what? No, we gonna come right back to that point. She need to get right back to that point. That's deep. That's deep.
Arabia or the UAE, as Matt mentioned. How does it
call it what it is? They don't want it. Neither side wants a democracy.
It's greatly, not only in terms of finding an eventual settlement, ceasefire, and then hopefully to return to discussions in terms of overseeing a civilian democratic regime, but also these are two generals that really are thriving on the financial support that they're receiving from the UAE on the part of Hemeti, and of course with respect to Burhan, the logistical and financial support from Egypt. But I did want to emphasize that overall it complicates it because of where Sudan is geographically. In addition to the financial patronage, we have the Red Sea area. Sudan is extremely strategically placed. And so if we look at it in a kind of a larger way, what we see over the last year since the revolution of 2019 is the scramble over building a naval base in Port Sudan. And that is something that the UAE cares deeply about. They've already invested $6 billion, I believe, estimated to build a naval base in Port Sudan. We have Russia, of course, interested in it as well. The United States has conducted military exercises with the UAE, Port Sudan. And we also have China that's interested in that region. So that part of the story is crucial because it gives us a long-term understanding of why Sudan is so important. In addition to that, it's important to understand that there are extreme financial investments on the part of Saudi Arabia and the UAE, in addition to the logistical financial support, billions of dollars worth of land to deal with.
Let me ask you about that. The UAE and Saudi Arabia are the financiers of the Sudanese army and the RSF, the Rapid Support Forces, who, as Matt said, lent them fighters for the war in Yemen. But now that the war in Yemen is winding down, it seems, do you think these two sides can get the generals to listen? Khalid.
I do. I think that's a very important point. I do think that since Saudi Arabia has sought an exit option in Yemen, and the UAE obviously, of course, has mired itself in Yemen, and that proved unsuccessful. I think that it's most people acknowledge that at this point there are changing calculations on the part of the United Arab Emirates. They no longer have that kind of interest. In other words, Hemeti no longer serves the role that he served so well for them in Yemen, and also, of course, in Libya when they also supported him alongside Haftar in Libya. I think that calculation means that there is a possibility that the UAE would put pressure on Hemeti, or rather withdraw any kind of support. I do believe that Hemeti's desperation from his part, there are other calculations for Burhan, have very much to do with the fact that he has lost the kind of external patronage that he wanted or kind of enjoyed in the past, nor has he been able to get the kind of support from Ethiopia that he was counting on from Abiy Ahmed.
Okay, Khulud, let me come to you on this. As we've heard from both Matt and Khalid, there are a lot of players, outside forces in this conflict, which means a lot of would-be mediators. From Egypt, of course, the UAE, Saudi Arabia, the Russians, even the Chinese to some extent, as you heard. How do you think this complicates the solution to ending the fighting? And which of these mediators do you think stands a chance at convincing the generals to stop the fighting?
Oh,
I'm just going to click random stuff and spin.
Y'all, I am eating this up right now because this is deep and it's a lot to be dissected. So let's keep it rolling.
The fact that you have these different actors who have different interests in Sudan, but also in the region. So, for example, the reporting that General Haftar in Libya is sending troops to support Hemeti and the paramilitary forces, whereas the Egyptians are sending aerial support and other types of support to the Sudan armed forces on the other side. Whereas in Libya, they're on the same side, Haftar and the Egyptians. And so there's a bit of a sort of chaotic scene here, and it makes it very unpredictable, which interest will win out in which sort of geography. I think when it comes to mediators, it's not a case of choosing one over the other.
But who has the most leverage right now?
Yeah, so the thing is that's exactly the point. The leverage is required, and no one, not even those who have leverage, have put leverage on the table, which is why we have had 3 consecutive failed ceasefires. But the Egyptians have been able to secure enough of the ceasefire to land their plane, pick up their soldiers, and leave. The Emiratis said that they have helped the Egyptians do that and secure those reassurances. So clearly there are avenues for a ceasefire. The issue is that all of these actors need to work together. They need to be in lockstep with each other, including all the P5 and Russia, China, and the US and others. And that we haven't seen that happening. We've seen a very fragmented international response.
Okay. Matt, you mentioned earlier that it is not in the interest of the Saudis or the Emiratis to have a civilian-led government in Sudan. Why is that? And does that mean that these 2 countries cannot mediate in this conflict?
Well, let me qualify my statement by saying I don't think it's the interest of pro-democracy groups, genuine ones in Sudan, to have quote-unquote civilian-led, which I think is just a euphemism for failed partnerships of military, personalities that de facto control the state with civilian faces. So I think we need to use the same terminology that we would use for any Western democracy. It's either a civilian one or it's a military controlled one.
Out of order.
And so, yeah, I don't think regional players are interested at all in a civilian democracy. And that's just not exclusive to Sudan. I don't think that they're interested in civilian rule anywhere throughout the region, because I think any example of that, but particularly one, perhaps in Egypt's case, that's so close to it neighborly, has ripple effects that can then, obviously encourage a number of other people to envision a different life for themselves as well. And so, absolutely, I think this is what I mean. I think despite the conventional view of security from Egypt and the ideological more view of security from the Emirates, both of them fear a domino effect accordingly that can threaten, their interests and the security of their regimes when they see any kind of democratic example that erupts anywhere. And Sudan, in many ways, is actually a democratic example, just maybe not in the sense of the blueprint of the quote-unquote nation state, but the spirit of democracy is very much thriving there. And then a lot of the things that Khaloud mentioned in terms of how these resistance committees are assisting civilians, that's indicative of how that spirit of democracy and credibility of actors that are rallying for one another is still existing even amid the war.
All right. Khalid, your thoughts about this. What are these regional powers, including the Emirates and Saudi Arabia, Egypt even, what are they more interested in right now? A stable Sudan or progress towards establishing a democratic government?
Well, they're not, without question, I agree with your guest 100%. They're interested in a stable Sudan. But the important question, or the question that raises itself, as we say, is can there be a stable Sudan with one of these generals taking over? And I think the answer is a categorical no. I think what the depth of this crisis, what it has demonstrated, even on the part of Egypt, UAE, and Saudi Arabia, is that a military government in Sudan is not capable actually of delivering stability. And here we turn to the United States, which I think is important, including the Congress that asked for sanctions against these generals. For the United States, for good or bad, but the position is that there is no possibility for stability for Sudan and the region, which is important to them, without returning to some form of civilian government. I think that
pressure has been applied by the U.S.
Absolutely not. In fact, there are Americans in Congress who are complaining and critiquing.
All right. Great. All right, we're going to keep that going. This story, it is crazy. Thanks for tuning in. I'm going to keep it going. It's a lot going on there. Yeah, we'll get back to it.
Is pushing the Biden administration to try to find an option here. And this has happened in the past. There is always a possibility the United States can actually put pressure, particularly on Saudi Arabia and UAE, because actually they were part and parcel of helping to oversee the framework agreement that did not go through. That's key. The final aspect that I'd like to mention is Egypt. Egypt is absolutely not in a transition to a civilian government. But Egypt is making miscalculation from my perspective, in the sense that they actually are underestimating the influence of the former members of the National Congress Party that are backing Burhan. They feel that Burhan would be on their side. And even though the regime, at least, is opposed to the Islamists, so to speak, they are underestimating the strength and the role of the remnants, as we call in Sudan, of the National Congress Party. Here again, we want to talk about a final important source of patronage, and that is the vast wealth of the National Congress Party and its members. Much of that wealth actually is in other countries, other bank accounts. This is why discussions of targeted sanctions against these two generals I believe, is going to be extremely important. It's already on the table in Congress in the United States.
Okay, Khulud, your thoughts about this? Khalid says targeted sanctions against these two generals, and he also said something interesting, that Sudan cannot be led by either of these two generals. If not them, then who or what?
I mean, no one here wants either general to rule. That has become, that was always crystal clear in the way that the pro-democracy movement has been pleading with the international community to heed their call for a fully civilian government. When Burhan and Hemeti inherited the state from Omar al-Bashir and started this, sort of domino effect that has led us to where we are, they faced sort of a resistance from pro-democracy groups at every turn. And it was the political process and the political agreement preceding the clashes on Saturday that really tried to embed military rule into a sort of a future political dispensation. That has been outright rejected by many people in this country. There is a sort of idealism, I think, within the international community that perhaps these generals could be reformers. Perhaps they could somehow, and against all odds, midwife a civilian democracy in Sudan.
Wait a minute. This is where I gotta chime in. This is where I have to chime in. If you think, and this is sick that we're here. When the Janjaweed starts becoming the most reasonable entity to perhaps be able to help transition into some form of democracy, simply because I'm just making a prediction here. I'm not making any accusations or claim, but I noticed that the Rapid Support Forces agreed to a ceasefire when U.S. Secretary of State Blinken asked for a 24-hour ceasefire so the civilians could get out. All of a sudden, the Janjaweed I'm like, oh, so we got some sway over there? Okay, great. Very, very interesting. So, if we have sway over there, we might be able to do the Janjaweed, but that's we're going to need so many concessions. Oh my God. We're going to have so many, oh my gosh. I don't want to say overseers. But when the Janjaweed start seeming like the likeliest possibility to make it out of this, you're fucked. In other words, sorry, you're fucked. There's no other way to say that. When the Janjaweed becomes the most likely ally, damn, this is crazy. I think everybody's shocked. Everybody's shocked. Not possible. Everybody's shocked. Wow.
So for me, it's a question of, I think alternatives will emerge. I think we're in this conflict for a while, and as this conflict, continues, we will see civilian alternatives emerge. But what is crystal clear right now is that neither one of these generals, even if one of them were to win militarily, will have the legitimacy after this level of conflict in Khartoum to be able to govern. So there's absolutely no stability to be found from either one of them successfully coming out of this.
Matt, your thoughts about this. What do you believe is the way out of this current impasse? Right. And who do you think, coming back to our initial question, who do you think is best equipped today to mediate a successful resolution to this conflict?
Listen, the way out to the current situation, I fear, isn't going to be as easy. And this is something that the global community, in particular Western countries, have brought about themselves. I think failing to pay sensitive and adequate attention to Sudan and being receptive to the nuances of the country and also the demands of the pro-democracy movement, they have, in a way,
Great. All right. So now we're starting to talk about how to come out of this. So we'll wrap up the report here. Great. Great. I'm gonna finish it up around this way, but I think that's where we're all at right now. How do we come out of this? Great. So thank you, thank you, thank you. We're gonna wrap it up here. We're winding it down. So I appreciate you all for tuning in. Thanks.
I do think actually that in Sudan, maybe it's the optimism in me that unlike, previous crises or conflicts, that have erupted over the last 10 to 12 years, I namely think of, for instance, Syria or Ukraine, where the Security Council has been so fundamentally polarized. I do think that, there are maybe a shared incentive here to contain the crisis. I think we need to think right now in smaller steps, and that should be, pressuring to get the immediate ceasefire, opening up humanitarian corridors, and prioritizing civilian protection. And I do think, obviously, the Security Council will be important because you're going to have larger partners larger countries that are tied to also having relations with Egypt and the Emirates as well. While they are U.S. partners, we understand global alliances are getting more blurry by the day. And to have that pressure and just that coordination there, especially with Chinese interests with the Belt and Road, they don't want to see this expand. Then I think there would be a possibility to rein these countries in. These are the countries that are backing these generals. And it's a sad reality that they need to be railed in and be cooperative in order to put out the fire that they, put gasoline on to begin with.
Yeah. Khalid, I'll give you the last word because we're almost coming to the end of our program. Your thoughts about how we end the current impasse and what happens if this conflict doesn't end swiftly?
Very interesting. So, so that's the latest from Khartoum. I just wanted to say this on my, just wrapping this up. I'm more focused on the civilians getting out. I hope that this becomes more of a major story in the United States, and I'm going to work on that. I'm getting the news information out. And this is a very critical point, but notice how when she said, okay, how do we get out of this? Right now it's about getting the people out. It's not even about how this is going to end. That is not even the priority right now. That is not the number one issue. It's about getting the people out. The latest that I heard is that the border at Chad is closing, so I'm not sure why the news is going that way, or it's closed, so not sure why the news is going that way. But that's the latest I heard. So, with this situation, the time zone is a huge difference. So, unfortunately, the most accurate news, 20,000 people fleeing Sudan through Chad. Going south. I can't believe people are going south. Like again, the most dangerous scenarios, or is probably the best route right now. Who says, yeah, let's go to South Sudan? South Sudan is stabilized now that it's being extracted and colonized for oil and gold. So yeah, let's go to the areas of colonization for the safest because they want to protect that money. This is all about ports, gold, bridges, dams. This is all the things that we call city works and the profiting of certain nations. So I thought that was a very good story, a very good way to look at this. I'm so happy that we were able to go through that report, and I'm just happy that it's available, and I'll share it. Keep getting the news out. Thank you to anyone that tunes in, especially those that tune in on YouTube. I appreciate you greatly. Make sure you subscribe, you like, you comment. Let me know that you are chiming in as well. I appreciate everyone's interest in this, or even just taking time to learn a little bit more about the situation in Sudan. So this is Lady Lila Brown hosting, using my resources to get information out. So again, domestically, stateside, we are focusing on the top 4 cities in the United States. We're talking about New York, Los Angeles, Chicago and Houston, and the mayors leading that. They have an agenda, they have a blueprint, they have a plan, and it's time to cut the crap and start dealing with reality. No more supremacy myths. It's time to deal with the real, and we will keep it focused on Sudan as well for our international news, and the news will vary in between that. Thank you to those that even take time to read the ticker there. That's kind of like the stuff that I wish I could talk about, but the way we budget the news here, we got to focus on the day's top stories, and that is the top U.S. stories, in my opinion, and that is the top international global story, and I think we can all agree with that in the journalism media community. So thank you to our citizen journalists. Thank you to our reporters, correspondents. Thank you to everyone that listens. We'll be turning a lot of these broadcasts into a podcast, so we'll keep that going as well. But thank you so much. I mean, it's a very, very sad situation. I'm going to rock us out with Chevalier de St. Jorge's, Joseph Boulogne. Yay. And, go see the movie. It's coming out next week. And, hopefully you stay safe out there. To everyone, until next time, take care and good luck. Wow. Goodbye.